grew up in a quiet farming town in Iowa, the kind where you know everyone by name and the nights are so still, you can hear the grain silos creak. My grandfather owned a small property just outside town, about 20 acres of corn, a weathered barn, and one old metal silo that stood taller than anything else around it. He used to say it watched over the land, but the older I got, the more I felt like it was the other way around, like the land was watching it. He told me never to go near it after dark, said there were sounds that came from inside sometimes, and they weren't animals. I used to think he was just trying to scare me, like old folks do, to keep kids out of dangerous places. But one summer, when I was 16, I found out he wasn't making it up. It started with the voices. He said they'd been faint at first, whispers that sounded like someone calling from inside. Sometimes it was his late wife's voice, sometimes his own. He told me it didn't matter what it said, that you were never supposed to answer, because if you did, it got louder. I laughed it off. I mean, I loved him, but he was in his 70s and lived alone. I figured he was hearing the wind, or maybe an echo from the barn. I never heard anything myself, not until that one afternoon in July. It was hot enough that the air shimmered over the fields. Grandpa had gone into town for feed, and I stayed behind to help paint the fence. Around noon, I heard someone call my name. Lena? It was faint but clear, like it came from far across the yard. I thought Grandpa had come back early. I wiped my hands and looked toward the barn. Nothing. The sound came again. Lena, come here. I followed it. It was coming from the direction of the silo. That thing had always creeped me out. The paint was peeling, the metal stained with rust. The top had a loose sheet of tin that flapped in the wind like it was breathing. The door at the base was chained shut, though the chain was old and loose enough that you could see through the gap. When I got close, the air felt colder, like standing near an open freezer. The smell was awful, damp and metallic. And then I heard it again. My own voice. Exactly like me, same tone, same pitch. Lena, it's okay, come up. It wasn't echoing, it was mimicking. I stepped back, heart pounding, trying to tell myself it was a trick. Maybe the sound bounced off the metal. Maybe someone was messing with me. But when I glanced up, I saw the ladder on the side, old, rusted, and going straight up to the top hatch. The sunlight hit it just right, so that the top glowed, and for a second, I thought I saw a shadow move past the opening. I called out, "Who's there?" Silence. Then softly, the same words came back to me, from inside the silo. "Who's there?" That's when I ran. When Grandpa came home, I told him everything. He didn't look surprised, just tired. He put down the feed sacks, sat at the table, and rubbed his temples. "I told you not to go near that thing," he said quietly. "It remembers voices. Once it hears you, it doesn't forget." He wouldn't explain what he meant. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I woke up to tapping. Slow, rhythmic, coming from outside the window. When I looked out, the silo stood black against the moonlight. The tapping stopped. Then faintly, from the yard, I heard my voice again. "Lena, come up." The next morning, Grandpa was sitting on the porch, shotgun across his lap, eyes fixed on the silo. He said it had been making noise all night, something shifting inside, like metal scraping against metal. The next day, I was in the kitchen when I heard him shouting from outside. By the time I got there, he was already halfway up the ladder, yelling something I couldn't make out. I screamed for him to stop, but he didn't even look down. He reached the top, leaned over the hatch, and then froze. completely still. "Grandpa." He turned his head slightly, and I'll never forget the look on his face. Wide-eyed, confused, like he was listening to something inside. Then he climbed down, slow and shaking. When he reached the ground, he grabbed my shoulders. His hands were cold, trembling. "He called me by your name," he said. "It sounded just like you." That night, he locked the doors and wouldn't speak another word. 2 days passed before it happened. I woke up early to make breakfast, but Grandpa wasn't in bed. His boots were missing, and the back door was open. I ran outside, barefoot, calling for him. The sun was barely up, the fields grey with fog. Then I saw it. Footprints in the dirt, leading straight to the silo. The chain on the door was gone. The ladder shook slightly, like someone had just climbed it. I shouted his name over and over. No answer. When I got closer, I noticed something lying at the base. His hat, his flashlight, and next to them, a pair of shoes. Mine. The same ones I'd left by the porch the day before. I don't remember much after that. Just running, the sound of something echoing my name, and the faint clang of metal above me. When the sheriff came later that morning, they searched the silo top to bottom. It was empty. The inside was dry and hollow, filled with dust and old grain husks. No sign of my grandfather. But the deputy, who climbed to the top, dropped a small stone inside to check the depth. We listened for it to hit bottom. It never did. They sealed it a few days later, welded every opening shut. The land was sold, and the new owners tore down the barn, the house, everything except the silo. Said the metal was too thick, too old to move. That was almost 10 years ago. Last month, I drove back out that way. The road's half overgrown now, the field's gone to weeds. But when I passed the spot, I swear I saw something strange. A faint flicker of movement at the top hatch, like someone standing there watching the road. I rolled down my window, just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. And then, from somewhere out in that tall grass, I heard a voice. My voice. "Lana, come on." I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. Folks in town claim they hear someone calling from that direction. A voice, soft and distant, echoing through the fields. This happened about 5 years ago, when my girlfriend and I were driving cross-country from Illinois to Oregon. We'd been on the road for hours that day, cutting through miles of open farmland and tiny, forgotten towns that didn't even show up on the map. It was late afternoon when the GPS suddenly lost signal. It rerouted a few times, spun the little blue arrow in circles, and then just froze. We figured we'd take the next turn and try to find a highway again. That's when we saw the house. It sat about 50 yards off the road, surrounded by tall grass and a few dying trees. Old, white paint peeling off, one broken window upstairs, and a rusted windmill creaking in the yard. It looked abandoned but not destroyed, the kind of place you pass without a second thought. We were both starving though, and she really had to use the bathroom. So we pulled over. I remember how still everything felt. No wind, no insects, no distant sounds of cars, just complete silence. The kind that makes your ears ring after a while. We walked up to the porch, and that's when I noticed the front door. It was locked. From the inside, you could see the latch through the little gap near the doorknob. Slid into place, clean and tight. That didn't make sense. You can't lock a door like that and leave the house unless someone's still inside." I looked at her, and she raised an eyebrow like, maybe someone's living here after all. So I knocked. Once, twice. Nothing. We circled around the side, and there was a small window that was cracked open enough for me to slip my hand through. I pushed it up, unlatched it, and climbed in. The first thing that hit me was the smell. The air was thick and heavy, like wet soil and rot. But under it was this faint warmth, like someone had just been cooking. That heat you feel in a kitchen after the stove's been on for hours. The living room was small and dusty. Furniture was still there. A couch, 2 chairs, a bookshelf full of warped paperbacks. On the wall hung a family photo so faded that their faces were just blurry shapes. "Hello," I called out. No answer. She climbed in behind me, coughing at the smell. We both froze when we heard something ticking, faint and steady. It was coming from the kitchen. There was a round wooden table set for 4. Plates, cups, silverware. Everything still in place, but covered in mold so thick it looked furry. The cups were half full of dark sludge, and in the center of the table was a clock. It was old, brass, with a cracked glass face. The hands moved smoothly, quietly, but backward. At first, I thought maybe it was a trick of the reflection or something mechanical, but no. It was really turning counterclockwise. I remember staring at it for a full minute, trying to figure it out. The longer I watched, the heavier the air felt, like the whole room was pressing down on us. "Let's just go," she whispered. We backed out slowly, and when we turned toward the front door, something else felt off. The air was still warm, like someone had just walked through. There were footprints on the floor, faint, but visible in the dust. Bare feet, leading toward the hallway. They didn't come back. We got out through the same window, climbed into the car, and started the engine. As soon as we turned onto the road, the GPS came back to life, but instead of recalculating our route, it flashed a message I'd never seen before. "Return to starting point." We thought it was a glitch. We ignored it and drove another half hour, following the same road, until it curved into a new stretch of forest. The GPS froze again, and when it reloaded, the screen showed we were back near mile marker 19. That's where the house was. We hadn't turned around. We hadn't taken any wrong exits. We just somehow ended up there again. I pulled over, frustrated, trying to figure it out. The marker stood in the same spot. Chipped paint, weeds growing up the post. I looked down the road, and sure enough, that same old farmhouse sat there in the distance. She said, "Don't stop. Please, just keep going." So I did. We drove another 30 minutes, and when we finally saw signs for a gas station, we both felt this weird relief, like maybe we'd shaken something off. But when I glanced at the dashboard map again, my heart sank. The route showed the same pin we'd started from, blinking slowly. Mile marker 19. We stopped for the night at a small roadside motel. The manager was this older guy who looked like he'd been there forever. He noticed our plates and asked where we'd driven from. When I mentioned the town's name and said we'd passed mile marker 19, his expression changed. "You took that road?" he asked quietly. "Yeah, why?" He just shook his head. "That's not a through road anymore. County shut it down back in the 90s. Flooding took out the bridge. You shouldn't even be able to get through." I told him we'd been there, that we'd seen the farmhouse, the clock, the footprints. He looked uneasy and said, "There used to be a family there, couple with 2 kids. They found them dead inside. Gas leak, they said. But the weird part was the door, locked from the inside. No one could explain that. He told us the place was torn down years ago. We didn't sleep much that night. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was open to Google Maps. The app had started on its own, zoomed all the way in on that same stretch of road. A blue arrow blinked near mile marker 19, and under it, the words, "Continue route." I shut the phone off and tossed it into the glove compartment. The next morning, we drove straight to Oregon, without stopping anywhere remote again. For a long time, I tried to rationalize it. Bad signal, glitchy GPS, maybe even a case of heat exhaustion making us misread what we saw. But last year, I started hearing stories online about that same road. People said their navigation systems kept rerouting them back there. Some posted photos. A blurry shot of an old farmhouse standing in a field where, according to maps, nothing existed. One guy swore he saw light in the upstairs window. Another said he knocked on the door and someone answered from inside. A voice that sounded exactly like his own.